Terrified, the woman ran through the forest with reckless abandon as she clutched the small bundle tightly against her bosom. The thundering hooves of her pursuers' mounts tore up the ground behind her in huge, mudding clumps. Her throat burned as she gulped the crisp, cold air of the early morning in frantic gasps. Her lungs seemed filled with fire. Her sides ached with her efforts, but she dare not stop. She could not allow them to catch her, for if they did, all hope would be lost. Morag would kill her baby, and the prophecy would be unfulfilled. Her eyes wide with fear, she risked a glance over her shoulder. Her stalkers were relentless. Twisting her ankle, she lost her footing upon the dew-slickened pine needles and tumbled down a small slope. Losing her grip upon the bundle, she careened through the tangled vines of velwood that grew wild about the forest floor. She cried out in agony as the thorns tore at the fabric of her clothes and ripped her flesh savagely. Renewed panic surged within her, fearing that the heavy war horses might trample her and her baby. She struck her hip on a sturdy ponderosa pine with a jarring thud, causing her momentum to slow. Wincing at the pain, she was able to dig heels and fingers into the ground, bringing her to a stop. Pine needles and grass clung to her wet, matted hair, and flecks of mud stuck to her cheeks. Her baby wailed in terror, knowing only that she had been torn from her mother's protective embrace. Her small, chubby arms flailed the air wildly, breaking the confined warmth of the woolen blanket. The woman ignored the pain that racked her tortured body and hobbled to the crying infant. She gasped sharply at the sight of a small bloodstain on the edge of the gray covering. Tears stung at her eyes as she frantically pulled back the soft fabric. Choking on her sobs, she was relieved to find that a velwood thorn caused the baby's only wound. The thorn still pierced the baby's tender skin just above her left breast, near the shoulder bone. With trembling fingers, she gently grasped the barb as carefully as she could. The baby wailed. Removing the thorn, she kissed the baby's head and held her close. "Shush, Adara. It is all right now. Mommy won't let anything else harm you ever again." "You should not make promises that you cannot keep." The gruff voice sounded amused, full of contempt. The woman's body stiffened as her eyes grew wide with fear. Her breath caught in her throat. A strangled sob escaped her lips as she bit on her fist in utter despair. Morag was behind her. From the sound of his voice, she knew that he couldn't be more than 20 paces away. Distraught over her failure, she searched the forest for an escape. Nothing. Only the distant sound of a babbling stream from somewhere below gave her any hope at all. She managed to swallow the lump in her throat. "Please, this is not the child that you seek. She's just a baby. She can do you no harm." Her eyes were drawn to the wound on his left cheek. It was a fairly recent cut, probably from a knife. His eyes were cold and cruel, and even sitting in the saddle, she could tell that he was tall and powerfully built. He had been handsome once, perhaps, but his fear of the prophecy had begun to take its toll on him. His dark hair was unkempt, and stubble covered his chiseled chin. Morag chuckles. "It matters not, gypsy. The child is of the right age. I simply cannot take the chance that you are lying." He motioned for his minions to take possession of the baby. As they stepped forward, the gypsy woman darted to the left at the last second, running blindly through the forest. The tears that filled her eyes blurred her vision. She ignored the pain in her swollen ankle, desperation speeding her onward. She could hear Morag's curses and his charging horse in renewed pursuit. The clank of the warrior's armor kept time with the thundering hooves. Morag's minions were crashing wildly through the brush, seemingly oblivious to the thick velvet brambles that grabbed at their skin. She stopped suddenly upon a rocky outcropping. Balancing precariously upon a jagged cliff, she managed to regain her footing and step back from the edge just in time. She could see the stream below. A thick mist seemed to rise from the flowing water. She turned, her eyes growing wide with undeniable terror. She was trapped. Morag and his minions blocked her only escape. Before she could plead for her daughter's life, Morag raised his crossbow and fired. The arrow penetrated the base of her throat. It severed the dainty gold chain she wore around her neck, causing the charm to come off in the baby's hand. She could feel herself falling backward, and knew that she would strike the rocks below. Her daughter had but one chance to survive. With all the strength left to her, she heaved the bundle through the air toward the river and the strangely swirling mist that seemed to sparkle with hope. Morag stood on the rocky precipice, staring at the broken and twisted body that lay upon the rocks 10 feet below. There was little doubt that the fall had killed the gypsy woman. Her eyes held the vacant stare that only the dead possess. "Find the infant," he ordered. He couldn't pull his eyes from the woman's face. Something about it didn't seem quite right. He grunted, feeling oddly disturbed. The gypsy seemed to be smiling, laughing at him with her fixed eyes.